Companies are profiting while Americans pay more. Our next guest is leading a push to slap a massive tax on their profits. Joining us now is Khanna, Democratic Congressman from California. Congressman, good to see you again. Your plan would tax what you call windfall profits that oil companies are getting, you say, off of the inflated price of oil. What you would like to do is levy a 50% tax on the differential between what the price of a barrel of oil is now compared to an average between 2015 and 2019. Why do that, and what's the ultimate goal here?
Well, the goal is to reduce prices. The oil companies are spending $44 billion on stock buybacks. They aren't increasing production. We tried the oil windfall tax in 1980. It actually led to increased production and decreased prices over a few years. And the hope is that oil companies will reduce the price to under $66 a barrel, and it will save taxpayers money.
You know, we had the former Vice President Mike Pence on earlier in the program. He says, don't tax the oil companies, incentivize them to produce more. Listen to what he said.
The idea that they're blaming the industry, that they're actually threatening on raising taxes on the industry, instead of simply saying, go develop our natural resources, to go develop in a responsible way the oil and natural gas resources of this country. Let's export it to the world. What we proved in the Trump-Pence administration was how quickly things can turn around.
The president said, this President Biden said earlier today, Congressman, I'm going to work with oil companies to ramp up production. But how would taxing them on what you say windfall profits be working with them?
Well, we're going to work with them in releasing the $180 million of strategic reserves, and the president is looking at providing a floor to buy back into those reserves, and that would help increase short-term production. But here's the problem. These companies are sitting on billions of dollars, and they aren't investing it in increased production. Wall Street is telling them to give it as dividends or stock buybacks. And the question is, they should be taxed for that, and that money go back to working families. If they want to increase production, they'll avoid the tax. But they shouldn't be allowed to pay off Wall Street with the profits.
So we had Virginia Senator Mark Warner on earlier this week, who said, here's his idea, that for companies that are sitting on these leases and not developing them, they should pay a tax on sitting on that lease. But when they decide to go ahead and start production, that the government should get out of the way and expedite all of the permits necessary to be able to produce on those leases. Would you agree with that?
For short-term production, as long as it sunsets, yes, I'm open to that idea. I'm open to the idea of the government providing a guaranteed floor at purchasing back for our strategic reserves money. That could help increase production. I want to incentivize them to produce. What I don't want them to do is have billions of dollars in profits and that going to stock buybacks or dividends. How is that helping anyone? And that's really what's going on right now.
We just got about 45 seconds left, Congressman. I want to ask you about the announcement from the Centers for Disease Control today that Title 42 exclusions at the border are going to sunset on May the 23rd. Getting a variety of response from the Democratic Party. Cori Bush says, fabulous idea. This was cruel and inhumane. Joe Manchin says, what? You can't do that? Not until we get some immigration reform. Where do you come down on it coming from a border state?
I support the president's decision. Here's why. This doesn't mean that everyone can suddenly come in. All it means is that you can't be preemptively told you don't come in. Here's the question I have for folks who don't want it. Do you want Ukraine refugees not to come into the United States? I mean, should we say no Ukrainian refugees because of COVID? Of course not. Let's evaluate people on asylum on a case-by-case basis, not have a blanket prohibition against refugees, including Ukrainian refugees.
But you could bring Ukrainian refugees in on temporary protected status. But the forecast is that if Title 42 comes off on the border, the number of migrants that we see right now, which is about 7,000 a day, is at least going to double. So the numbers that we saw in the peak of last year, 200,000 people crossing the border in a month, could be 400,000. Can we deal with that?
Well, we need to have the proper enforcement of the borders, and we need to make sure that people aren't coming in on asylum just for economic reasons and look at only allowing people for actual human rights violations. But we shouldn't have a blanket rule that you can't seek asylum in the United States.